The Commission President elaborated further, pointing to Moscow's attempts to test Europe's resolve. We are observing that Russia and its proxies are testing our resilience. They are probing our vulnerabilities, specifically in the Baltic airspace and at sea. And it was very insightful what you described here from your daily experience. For me, it is very clear also that we have to have a new approach to the new strategic importance of the Baltic Sea. We have to raise the attention. The Baltic, once considered a secondary theatre, is now a front line of geopolitical contest. Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania face constant airspace violations and maritime provocations. For von der Leyen, the conclusion is clear. Europe must raise its strategic attention to this region. She then tied these warnings to a broader plan. Against this backdrop, she said, we have to strengthen Ukraine's defence on one side, and we must take greater responsibility for our own defence posture. This is the logic behind the €800 billion defence industrial plan that we have launched. That plan, the largest in EU history, is intended to expand Europe's defence production, from ammunition to air defence systems. It reflects a recognition that Europe cannot depend indefinitely on external powers, even close allies like the United States. For Estonia, this message is welcome but urgent. The country spends more than 3% of its GDP on defence, one of the highest in NATO. Yet its leaders warn that even this is not enough. Without Europe-wide coordination and support, the Baltics remain vulnerable to Russia's hybrid tactics, from cyber attacks to disinformation, from energy pressure to direct military threats. The timing of von der Leyen's visit is no accident. Russia has intensified its strikes deep into Ukraine, targeting power grids, railways and urban centres hundreds of kilometres from the front line. Estonia sees these attacks not as isolated events, but as a blueprint of what Moscow could one day unleash against the Baltics themselves. The debate over frozen Russian assets looms large. Advocates like Michal argue that the funds must be used for Ukraine's defence and reconstruction. Critics, however, warn of legal risks and Russian retaliation. Still, the moral and political argument gains strength with each passing month of war. Why should Ukraine struggle to rebuild while Russia's wealth sits untouched in European banks? Von der Leyen's insistence on the Baltic's strategic importance also reflects a shift within the EU. For years, security discussions focused largely on the Mediterranean or the Middle East, but Russia's war has forced Europe to reorient. The Baltic Sea, with its choke points, energy routes and NATO supply lines, is now a security theatre of global significance. Standing at Ämari Air Base was itself a message. NATO's Baltic air policing mission is run from here. Fighter jets from across the alliance rotate through Estonia, intercepting Russian aircraft that test NATO airspace. Each scramble is a reminder that the Cold War's patterns have returned, but with 21st century technologies, drones, cyber and long-range missiles. The EU's €800 billion defence industrial plan faces scepticism. Can Europe truly ramp up production fast enough? Can national industries cooperate instead of competing? Can European Union member states overcome political divisions to make collective defence real? These are the questions von der Leyen's speech left hanging. For Estonia, however, there is no alternative. Its leaders remember 1940, when the Soviet Union annexed the Baltic states overnight. They remember 1991, when independence was restored, and they see 2025 not as a time for complacency, but as a time for preparation. Von der Leyen's visit then was not only a show of solidarity, it was a message, to Moscow, to NATO allies and to Europe itself. Estonia will not stand alone. Europe cannot afford hesitation, and Ukraine's fate will shape the security of the entire continent. As the press conference concluded, both leaders left the stage with their message delivered. Estonia's warnings, once dismissed as alarmist, now define Europe's reality. And in the shadow of war, the Baltic's importance has never been greater. From Harjumaa, Estonia, this has been a frontline reminder. Europe's security, Ukraine's survival, and the Baltic's future are now bound together. Good evening. From Harjumaa, Estonia, we bring you a significant story at the heart of Europe's eastern frontier. Today, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen arrived at the Ämari Air Base just outside Tallinn, welcomed personally by Estonian Prime Minister Kristen Michal. Her visit, set against the backdrop of war in Ukraine and mounting security concerns, is far more than ceremonial. It is a pointed reminder that the Baltic states now stand on the front line of European defence against Russian aggression. As the motorcade arrived, von der Leyen and Michal walked side by side, greeting the press before entering closed-door talks. The atmosphere was serious, underscored by the location itself, a base that serves as NATO's shield in the skies over Estonia. For a country of just 1.3 million people, the symbolism could not be greater. Estonia knows from history how vulnerable its position is, wedged on the edge of Russia's influence. Inside, the two leaders began their discussions. The agenda was clear, strengthening Europe's ability to respond to new forms of warfare, including drones, cyber attacks, and hybrid operations that blur the lines between peace and conflict. Estonia has long warned about these risks. Now they are materializing in real time. When they stepped before the press, Prime Minister Kristen Michal was blunt in his assessment. He reminded Europe that drone incidents in the region were not theoretical threats, but daily challenges. In his words, Ursula, your visit to our region is very, very timed. Recent drone incidents, which we talked about, showed that we need to enhance our defence capabilities and invest into drone detection and response. His message was simple: Estonia cannot fight this battle alone. Europe must act, and it must act decisively. Michael went further. He spoke of Russia's ongoing campaign of terror against Ukraine, warning that Moscow has no interest in peace. Russia continues and even intensifies its cruel attacks against Ukrainians far from the front line, he said. This clearly shows that Putin is not looking for peace. The only language Putin understands is pressure and strength. That means tougher sanctions and increasing our military support to Ukraine. Europe must move forward with the use of Russian frozen assets for Ukraine. Ukraine's progress on the EU path must also continue swiftly. In those words lay two of Europe's toughest debates: how to confront Putin militarily and whether to use billions in frozen Russian assets to rebuild Ukraine. For Estonia, the answer is clear: strength, sanctions, and solidarity. Von der Leyen, taking the podium, acknowledged those concerns. She noted that the very dangers Estonia warned about have now come to pass. We see Russia's brutal war against Ukraine, and it is very obvious, and that is your daily experience, that Putin will not stop. Her words were both recognition and warning. Russia's aggression is not limited to Ukraine. It is part of a wider strategy to destabilize the European neighborhood.
Italian phone number?
Yes.
Good afternoon. It is time to start with our press conference with
Ursula, your visit to our region is very well timed. Recent drone incidents. Finally, we also discussed Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Russia continues and even...
And we had just started the principle of air defense here in Estonia. So we want to draw on your experience and tighten and sharpen the sanctions. 19 member states have signed up for SAFE by now. Estonia is...
And I believe we still have time for 2 questions. So before you ask the question, please tell your name.
To both leaders.
Dear Ursula, your visit to our region is very well timed. Recent drone incidents, which we talked about, show that we need to enhance our defense capabilities and invest into drone detection and response. Russia continues and even intensifies its cruel attacks against Ukrainians far from the front line. This clearly shows that Putin is not looking for peace. The only language Putin understands is pressure and strength. That means tougher sanctions and increasing our military support to Ukraine. Europe must move forward with the use of Russian frozen assets for Ukraine. Ukraine's progress on the EU path must also continue swiftly.
Dear Kristen, the risks that Estonia has long warned us about what Russia is concerned have now materialized. We see Russia's brutal war against Ukraine, and it is very obvious, and that's your daily experience, that Putin will not stop. And as you described, we are observing that Russia and its proxies are testing our resilience. They are probing our vulnerabilities, specifically in the Baltic airspace and at sea. And it was very insightful what you described here from your daily experience that you have. So it's for me very clear also that we have to have a new approach to the new strategic importance of the Baltic Sea. We have to raise the attention. Against this backdrop, we have to strengthen Ukraine's defense on one side, and we must take greater responsibility for our own defense posture. And this is the logic behind the 800 billion euro defense industrial plan that we have launched